Where we last left off, I'll talk about the Santa Fe 3766 class, Santa Fe 464 Hudson's 3468, 3461, the Chesapeake, Ohio C16 OEOs, the Union Pacific 2880 Consolidation Rallies or Bull Moose, and the Illinois Central 2600 Series 482 mountain type locomotives. Get ready for these upcoming extinct steam class locomotives. At number 8, we got, get ready for this, the Grand Trunk Western K4A's 462 Pacifics. During the days of steam, the Grand Trunk Western Railroad needed a new class of steam locomotives that could haul freight trains at fast speed. In response to this, the American Locomotive Company, or ALCO, who was insisting on designing a locomotive class with a GTW, had went back to the drawing board to draw up a design, and did the Grand Trunk Western Class K4As. They were built to haul both passengers and freight trains at a maximum speed of 80 miles an hour, or 130 kilometers miles per hour. These K4A Pacifics were built in the 1920s for the use in freight and passenger service. By the time that GTW were dieselizing, the K4As were retired in the 1950s and all scrapped, except for one. 5629 was retired in 1959 and placed in storage in Durant, Michigan until being sold to Richard Johnson in 1960, where the engine was restored and started pulling excursion trains, and also pulled the circuit string until Richard Johnson has an accident with a fridge and couldn't afford for the locomotive to run more excursions. He decided to place the locomotive in one of Rock Island's yards until the Rock Island Railroad sold the yard to Metro. They wanted Johnson to move the locomotive, but he couldn't. Soon enough, Johnson and Metro went to court, and the judge stated that if Johnson couldn't move 5629, then Metro would be allowed to scrap it. Many museums, including the Illinois Railway Museum, wanted to save the 5629 from being scrapped from Metro. However, they couldn't because it would be too costly to move the locomotive. Eventually, it was too late. Metro had received a court order to scrap the 5629. Metro sent out a team to scrap the engine. Scrapping commenced on July 14th and ended on July 20th. Soon enough, it was discovered that 9 Metro employees had vandalized the locomotive. Soon enough, those 9 employees were fired from Metro and never worked for Metro again. And Johnson sued Metro. However, he lost the suit. Right after the scrapping of 5629, there was rumors going around that Metro had hated steam since they scrapped the 5629. However, it was false, because they wanted to save the engine, but they can't due to Johnson's idiocy. One best example would be the 765. Between 2016 and 18, the Metro teamed up with the Fort Wayne Railroad Historical Society to run excursions with the 765 along their main line, which they cared for steam engines. They wanted to save the 5609 and donate it to a museum, but they can't due to Johnson, which he was hated by the community after the incident. It's a shame that a K4A Pacific excursion star continued the legacy of the K4As until 1987. However, K4B 5632 was preserved and placed on display, continuing the legacy of the K4 class, including the fallen K4A class. Coming at number 7, we have the Southern Railway T-Class 482 Mountains. With heavy steel body passenger coaches, the Southern Railway's 12 and 1300 Pacific series couldn't keep up with the timetable. So the Southern Railway needed a new passenger engine to cope and keep up with the timetables. In 1917, the Bowman Locomotive Works built 30 new 42 multi-type steam locomotives, with 23 of them going to the Southern Railway and 7 of them going to 2 different railroads. These new Southern Railway 42 mountain-type locomotives had 69-inch driving wheels, 27 by 20-inch cylinders, a 200 psi boiler, a total effort of 50,290 pounds, and weighing at 242.9 tons with a tender. Speaking of the tenders, The continuous skid had up to 12 tons of coal and 9,000 gallons of water. The locomotives were fitted with a southern valve gear, but was later replaced with the more traditional water valve gears. However, due to some turns on the line east of Asheville, North Carolina, the engines were equipped with floating front driving to cope with the tightness of the curve. This was also found in the S-Class 222 Santa Fe. C-Class locomotives operated on the Washington through Atlanta main line for a number of years, working in both directions out of Spencer, North Carolina. They were also used extensively between Bristol and Memphis via Chattanooga. They were even given the green and gold paint scheme like the Southern Railway's PS4 class. Speaking of the PS4s, when the PS4 class Pacifics arrived in the 1920s, all the 42s were relegated to the Atlanta through Birmingham and Macon through Chattanooga passenger runs. However, the engines assigned to the Asheville division still kept their titles as heavy passenger engines. Unfortunately, the diesels began arriving on the Southern Railway in the 1950s, and Southern Railway is starting to retire the 42 Mountains. The first class to be retired was in 1940, beginning with 6696, and between 1949 and 1953, they were dropping like flies. By the end of 1953, only 6695 remained on the roster. It was later retired in August 1954 and was sold for scrap after that. It's really depressing to see a 42 Mountain for the Southern Railway be extinct. We would like to see a Southern Railway 42 Mountain be preserved. Because, honestly, two reasons actually. The first reason, it would join the depreciation era with other Southern Railway steam engines, like 630 and 4501. And second, there's barely any 42 Mountains preserved. There's only 5022 I could think of that time. And number 6, we got the Chicago, Rhode Island, and Pacific, or just the Rock Island, all 6B 44 Northerns. It was the 1920s, and the 44 Northerns were now presented to the world after the Great Northern Railroad tested the first ever 44 Northern in 1926. With this new type rearrangement, many railroads like Canadian National, Santa Fe, Union Pacific, Norfolk Western, etc. were now using the 44 Northern rearrangement. However, the Rock Island Railroad wanted to test if the 44 Northern are really powerful. To test the 44 rearrangement on the Chicago Rock Island Pacific Railroad, the railroad bought one class R67A 44 number 5000 for the American Locomotive Company in 1929. The locomotive performed so well that the CRINP bought 24 more before the year ended. In 1930, 40 more were purchased from Alco. These 65 locomotives had 69-inch drivers, 26-plate, 32 cylinders, a boiler pressure of 250 psi, weighed about 437,000 pounds, and have a traffic effort of 66,620 pounds. Although designed for freight trains, they were also used in passenger service, and some were rebuilt with 70-inch drivers to provide more speed when used on passenger trains. In 1944, the Rock Island Railroad took deliveries of 10 more Northerns. In 1946, 10 more, or 20 of these class R67Bs Northerns came from Alco. The first 10 were oil burners, and the last 10 were delivered as coal burners. These 20 locomotives had 34-inch drivers, 26 by 32 cylinders, a boiler pressure of 270 psi, a weight about 434,500 pounds, and a total effort of 67,080 pounds. The Rock Island Railroad had the largest fleet of 44 Northerns in the United States and was second to the Canadian National in North America and third to the USSR in the world. However, none of the Rock Island Railroad Northerns survived to preservation, as they were sadly cut off in favor of diesel power.